Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Alright, chess fans, today we're going to be taking a look at the Wimbledon of chess, and it is none other than the 2025 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. The Tata Steel has already started for 7 rounds. We have the Masters, the Challengers, and the Amateurs. But I'm pretty sure that the main focus are on the Masters. Now, the Masters also has played 7 rounds, and we have a lot of thrilling games that has been going on so far. And today, let's dive into the thrilling performances by the reigning world chess champion Gukesh Dommaraju and Uzbekistan's rising star Nodirbek Abdusattorov. And they have been playing against each other in round 6. And in round 6, they had a just so exciting game. The game was just like too thrilling. Like, I'm going to show the game with you guys later. But in the 6th round, Nodirbek, he was just on fire, quickly gaining a huge advantage against Gukesh. Maybe not huge, but at least just in human eyes, there is a kind of big advantage. Not like leading to a immediate win, but of course, both sides knew that Nodirbek is the side who is better. Now, these two players, they have quite a history actually. Back in the 2022 FIDE Chess Olympiad, where Gukesh was also facing against Nodirbek, and he made a mistake that cost India the gold medal. But this time, Nodirbek, he continued his strong form, coming out of the gate with full force. Now, despite a rough start, Gukesh, he showed incredible resilience, constantly looking for opportunities, like creating counterplay, even though he is in a really tough position. Now, the game was like a roller coaster. As I said, it was a really thrilling game, with Nodirbek repeatedly gaining winning chances, but only for Gukesh to skillfully defend and turn the tables. Now, in the end, Gukesh, he didn't win. Like, he didn't really turn completely the table around, but he did come to a draw. Now, the intense battle concluded in a draw, and making it one of the most exciting games of the whole tournament so far. Now, it is actually kind of lucky for Gukesh to make a draw there, because Nodirbek had so many winning chances before, where he made a mistake and then just the game suddenly turned into a draw. But I'm not saying that Nodirbek is playing really badly. He played really well, but just in the end made a small mistake. And the result is actually not that bad for both sides, especially for Gukesh, who defended the whole game. Now, moving on to the 7th round, where Gukesh delivered an outstanding win, defeating Pentala Harikrishna from India, who is also a really strong player. Now, this victory was significant, really important, as it puts him in a tie for the lead with Nodirbek as well as Pragnananda. Gukesh, he displayed both his strong skills and calm mindset in round number 6 in that game, and handling his opponent's strategies with ease. Now, also in round 7, he also showed a lot of his strong skills and calm mindset, but I just say, in my opinion, in round 6, where he was playing against Nodirbek, he just defended it so calmly and showed how strong his defending skills are. Now, meanwhile, Nodirbek, he settled for a draw against Anish Giri. This meant that they are now all 5 points, 5 out of 7, if I'm not mistaken. And the tournament, of course, is still heating up, because there are still, I think, 6 rounds left, because there are 13 rounds in total. And Gukesh, and both Gukesh, Nodirbek, well, actually, the 3 of them, Gukesh, Nodirbek, and Pragnananda, they are strong contenders for the title. Now, in the 8th round, Prague will be facing Gukesh. So these two they're all from India. So will they just settle in for a draw, or will they fight? And also, Nodirbek is taking on Fedosev. Now, these matches, they promise to be full of excitement. Also, other games are full of excitement as well, but we are mainly focusing on these 3 players and their games. Now, today, let's stay tuned for more incredible chess action. But now, I'm going to show you guys round 6 and round 7 played by Gukesh. Now, in round 6, where Gukesh is playing against Nodirbek Abdusattorov, Gukesh is with the black pieces, and Nodirbek starts with e4. Now, at this point, before round 6, where it's round 5, Nodirbek is 4 out of 5. He drew 2 games and won all of the others, where for Gukesh, he is 3.5 out of 5. Slightly the points are slightly lower than Nodirbek, so Nodirbek at this point is in the lead. But Gukesh, he is just behind half a point, so anything can happen. He played e5. Now this is a really solid opening choice. Knight f3, and we have the knight c6. Bishop c4, okay, the Italian game. Now bishop b5 is also something that we predict that might happen in Grandmaster games. In Grandmaster games, both bishop b5 and bishop c4 are really calm opening choices, the Rue Lopez and the Italian. Other choices are like d4, like the Scotch. But here we have bishop c4, bishop c5, just simply copying the development. And here we have a4. Now, a4 is not the most common approach here. The most common approaches here are short castle, c3, and d3. Now, a4 is probably something that is what Nodirbek has prepared, and he wanted to get out of Gukesh's home preparation. But of course, after a4, Gukesh definitely knows how to play this, and he played the best approach with knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn, and now Nodirbek defends it with d3. Here we have d6, and simply the structure is again really similar. And here we have a5. Now, what White is doing is actually White is trying to create, to increase his space on the queen side. Now you might ask, okay, if White here goes a4, then why can't for Black just go a5? Well, a5 is possible, and now probably White goes for something like c3. a5 is possible, but here it's just not that necessary. Kind of unnecessary because, a4, White is threatening to go a5, but there's no immediate further threats, and Black doesn't really need to worry about a5, a6 ideas by White, because that will take a lot of moves for White to push a6. But of course here a5 is possible, but instead in the game Gukesh decides to play knight f6. Development is always the most important thing in the openings, and then the second important thing is get your king to safety. Now here d3 was played, d6, a5. Now, a5, in the future, White will be having some a6 threats, but not now. And here, Black simply played bishop b4 check. Now, also, if Black wants to prevent some counterplay by White on the queen side, Black can just simply go a6. And also, in the future, if White plays c3, d4 to attack the bishop can safely retreat back to a7. But here, that is not what happened in the game. In the game, bishop b4 was played, which is also all theory. Bishop d2. Now, this move was given 1 exclamation mark by chess.com, but this is the best move here. Other moves are all giving Black the initiative. For example, if you go knight c3 here, now, you lose the a5 pawn, that is, and you have to probably go back to keep the bishop here. But Black is just simply up a pawn. So here, in order to not lose the pawn, the only move for White is to go bishop d2. And here, Black takes on d2. Both sides traded off a pair of bishops, and now they all got their kings to safety. Here, Gukesh decides to play knight e7. Now, his idea is probably to reroute this knight to g6 to f4, and maybe even in the future push c6, d5 at some point. Now, this is a very logical idea, but what the computer suggests more is to get this knight to f4 by going knight h5, knight f4, because this knight can also be really useful by jumping to d4, also putting pressure on the a5 pawn. But knight e7 is not a bad move, and then the game c3 was played. Now d4 is an upcoming plan by white. Knight g6, so Gukesh is following his idea of getting the knight to f4, and here rook e1 was played. And now Gukesh here, he didn't play knight f4, which is actually not necessary right now because the knight can't really attack anything here. Maybe at some point if white's queen were on e2 or like some other pieces that can reach black's knight's approach, like that can be in the knight's control, then probably knight f4 at that time will be a good option, but not right now. And here Gukesh, he played this kind of inaccurate move. Now this move is not given any like no exclamation marks, no question marks. It is just a very normal move, but this is the move that starts all the trouble. Now in the game, Gukesh played h6. h6 is a move that happens a lot in both the Roll Lopez as well as the Italian game, because h6, you want to prevent some knight g5, bishop g5 ideas here. Okay, well at this point white doesn't have bishop g5, but maybe at some point knight g5. Also simply opening up this like creating this h7 square for the king to run away, preparing for some like maybe in the future at a very long distance, at some point where black might have some back rank problems. At that time you can get your king to h7 to safety. Well, h6 is actually a move that is like really necessary in many situations, but not in this position, because it does it does kind of create a weakness, because this knight on g6, it is defended by the f pawn, but the f5 not f5 pawn, sorry, but f7 pawn. But the pawn right now is being pinned by the bishop. Like the bishop is pinning the pawn and the king, and at some point if white takes the knight on g6, you can never take back because the king is under that pin. Also, I mean, it just somehow weakens the light squares, and it's just simply a move that is useless right now. And here, Nodirbek played d4. Start launching the attack in the center immediately, and this just shows suddenly that black is way too slow in development, and that is why here black should have just gone bishop d7 to develop his pieces. Now d4 is possible, but black does have this b5 approach, approach, and then if you take on b6, a takes b6, now probably something like, I don't know, b4, at least black gets to keep the position together, and this bishop can probably still support b5 at some point. Alright, bishop d7 is the best approach here, but instead h6 was played. This is just slowing down black's development speed, and here d4 was played immediately by Nodirbek, and here Gukesh played knight h7. So you see that this is his follow-up plan of h6 to reroute the knight to g5 to offer a trade. Now this is something that happens a lot, I mean, especially in the Roll Lopez, where black goes h6, knight h7, and knight g5. But here, again, this is just way too slow. Black needs to develop his pieces, or else white will just be creating a ton of counterplay in the center. And here, Nodirbek, he played this really interesting move. He played rook e3. Now, I'm not saying that this is the best move, but this is a very interesting move. Like, when you just look at this position, can this rook e3 move come to your mind even? I mean, just something probably like bishop f1 comes to your mind, or just h3 to prevent bishop g4. These are like the kind of moves that comes to your mind when you take a look at this position. But rook e3 is the move that Nodirbek has, and he just thought about this move and he played rook e3. He spent 14 minutes on this move, and we see that he just wanted to come up with the follow-up ideas. And what are the follow-up ideas of this move? The idea is that at some point, I mean, because black is threatening to go knight g5, right? And that is what happened in the game indeed. And now white takes on g5, queen takes g5, and the rook is suddenly free to come to the king side at some point. I mean, rook g3 threatened the g6 knight. rook f3 maybe. I mean, the rook is just really flexible here on the third rank, even if it can't go to the king side. But at some point, it can just, like, white can just double the major pieces on the e file. So the rook is really, really flexible, and even it can go to d3 at some point to gain control of the d file. Now, this is actually a really creative move that actually worked well in the game. Here, Nodirbek decided to play g3. His idea is to gain control of these dark squares. This meant that he is not going to go rook g3, but maybe at some point move the king away from this file and then go h4. The rook is still kind of useful on e3, defending the e4 pawn, and at some point opening up and go to the d file. It's really flexible. Here, bishop g4 was played, attacking the queen. Here, Nodirbek played h4. This is a move that just asking black to choose. Are you going to get into, do you want to get into an endgame immediately with bishop takes d1, and then I'll take, we get the queens off the board, bishop g4 takes. But probably Gukesh just thought that this position was not good enough for him. He had two weaknesses on the king side. Also, white has quicker attack on the king side with f4 probably. And he probably thought that at this point, white is in a much more convenient zone. And then he played queen h5. Still attacking the queen, and then white moved away with queen b3, also attacking the b7 pawn. But I'm not saying that white is going to take on b7 because black can always win the pawn back by taking the b2 pawn. But at least white is now putting more pressure on the f7 pawn. In the game, rook b8 was played defending b7 pawn. Knight f1, very logical. The knight can jump to h2 to tickle the bishop. Here, knight e7 was played. Now, Gukesh realized that this knight is not good enough on g6. It is not making its own use, and therefore he decided to reroute this knight once again and get the knight at least back to a place where it's more useful. Maybe in the future supporting f5. Also, the queen is now defending f7 as well, meaning that the king can finally run away from this diagonal and black will have some f5 possibilities. In the game, knight h2 is played, tickling the bishop goes back, because if you just ignore it and play something like knight c6, now white will just happily take and take. We have a bishop versus knight position. But then after bishop e2 attacking the queen, white gains the tempo, and after the queen goes back, white can now just white has a ton of space on the queen side, and it's not that easy for black to play because this knight is not a good knight. It doesn't have an outpost to go to. It can't really attack anything. Probably white just go for something like queen a4 here, pitting the knight and the queen, threatening d5, defending the d4 pawn. This is a better position for white. That is why in the game, Gukesh decided to get this bishop back with bishop d7, and in the game, Nodirbek played bishop e2, attacking the h5 queen. Queen goes back. Here, Nodirbek decided to open up with d takes e5 after d takes e5 with rook d1, getting this rook to the d file, attacking the bishop, and now you can finally see that this e3 rook is gonna get to d file at any point, but right now it is defending the e4 pawn, so it can't really go to the d file. But in the future, if white needs to double the rooks on the d file, it's just going to take one move for white to get the rooks working together. So in the game, however, it is black to move, and now the bishop is being attacked, so the bishop moves to e6, attacking the b3 queen, and we have queen b5 attacking e5 pawn. Black defends it with knight c6, and here we have a6. Now already at this point, the position is kind of leaning more towards Nodirbek's side because he does have bigger space as well as more active pieces. The pieces are better coordinated than black's pieces are. The queen is much more active than black's queen, which is just simply blocked inside by its own bishop and the pawns. And here, black is already facing a problem. He cannot take on a6 because this knight is going to lose. But if he doesn't do anything, he is going to just simply be down a pawn. And in the game, Gukesh here, he played bishop c8, defending the b7 pawn, which is very logical. And here in the game, h5 was played, attacking the queen. Queen goes to f6, rook f3. You see that this e3 rook now is putting into use with rook f3 attacking the rook. Not the rook, but the queen. And in the game, queen e6 was played, and also this just shows that probably queen e6 here is better because, why allow white to attack you and then go queen e6? Also here, probably queen e6 is not the best square to hide. Queen e7 is slightly better than queen e6, but not a big deal. Queen e6 was played, and here we have bishop c4. Now the bishop and the rook are again putting a lot of pressure on this f7 pawn, which could be falling at any point. Queen e7 was played, queen a4. Now queen a4 is a move that somehow missed the chance. The best move here is to go rook fd3, lining the rooks up on the d file. Still, black cannot take on a6 because the knight is unprotected. Probably black goes something like queen e8 to defend the knight, but now you just go, for example, like something bishop d5, let's say. Still, black cannot take, and at this point, black has a lot of pressure. Knight e7 maybe, but then after, let's say, takes, and takes, we have, for example, we take all of the pieces, but now rook d7, these two rooks are working together excellently, whereas for black's two rooks, the e8 rook is especially passive. Now in the game, queen a4 was played, and knight d8, the knight gets to run away, and black is still doing fine here. A takes b7, bishop takes b7, and we have rook e3. Bishop c6 attacking the queen, queen a2, still they are eyeing towards this f7 pawn. Knight b7 was played. Now black is actually trying to get this knight back to c5 at some point, or, just to reroute the knight to at least a better square. Here b4 was played, preventing knight c5, and we have knight d6 attacking the bishop. Bishop comes to d5, offering a trade, and now we swap the bishops off the board and take with the rook. Now both sides reach a new position very close to an endgame already, and here Gukesh decides to play queen e6, pinning the rook and the queen. Now here, Nodirbek decided to play rook e2 to defend the a2 queen, c6 was played, and now we have rook a5. Now at this point, we have an endgame after queen a2, rook takes a2, but still I think white is doing much better than black is because white has the better pawn structure, whereas black's pawns are all kind of separated from each other. So like these two are the main weaknesses. And after rook f8, we have knight g4. The a7 pawn, if you take it right now, you lose the c3 pawn. So instead of just taking that pawn, white can actually wait because the a7 pawn will be forever a weakness, and just wait for the right moment. Maybe first of all to defend the c3 pawn. And here knight g4 was played, activating the knight, also attacking the e5 pawn, and here c5 was played. Now f6 would have been a more calm move, just simply defending the e5 pawn, and I guess this is gonna likely end in a draw because black is just gonna go up with the king. But instead, in the game, c5 was played. Now c5 is a two-sided move. If black just played really well after this move, black is gonna do fine. But white is also gonna create more counterplay by the c5 move that black played. And after takes, we have rook takes c7, and here rook takes c3 was played, and we have rook d7. Now, probably Gukesh thought that even though he is down a pawn, but he can still hold the draw. Now, knight e5 would have been a more straightforward approach by white, but instead, in the game, Nodirbek decided to play rook d7, and then white is now going to be up a pawn, knight e8, and we have knight takes c5, but still, the computer suggests that this is a draw. But the computer says that this is a draw doesn't mean that in human eyes, this is a draw that is easy enough to hold. In the game, knight f6 was played, but attacking the h5 pawn, giving up the f7 pawn, and after rook e7, rook b4, because here if you take on h5 now, there's going to be knight f7. If you go king f8, there's rook a7. White is going to defend the f7 knight still. In the game, rook b4 was played, attacking the e4 pawn, but this turned out to be a mistake. What black should have played is actually to go rook f8 to defend the f7 pawn. You are down a pawn, so you are the defending side. Then why not just go into defending mode completely by playing this rook f8 move? It might look a little bit ugly, but it does it is really effective. Now, probably white goes for something like g4 to defend the h5 pawn, but then there's knight h7. Black can jump to this g5 square, and if you go, f4, your king might get a little bit weak, and there might be some really annoying checks. But basically for black can just now start to wait, because if white just somehow moves this rook out, there will be knight f6 to attack the e4 pawn. And black will just keep on tickling the pawns until it is going to end in a draw. But in the game, Gukesh decided to activate all of his pieces to go all in, and he played rook b4, attacking the e4 pawn. But this just simply creates some counterplay as well for white. Now here, Nodirbek decided to play g4, and then we have rook c5. Now, rook c5 is just a huge blunder here. F3 was played. Now, F3 is the best move, defending the pawns. Here, what the engine suggests is actually just to get this rook back, defend the last rank, and still, the rook and the knight are attacking the e4 pawn. Now, if you take on f7, there's knight takes g4. So basically, white cannot take the f7 pawn, but if white doesn't do anything, black is going to still put a lot of pressure on the e4 and g4 pawn until white just gives up defending, and it's going to be a draw. But instead, in the game, Gukesh here, he decided to play rook c5 to attack, to put some pressure on this knight and threaten king f8 at some point. Here, the main problem is that it just simply allows white to push f3 to defend these two weaknesses. And now white is just up a very healthy pawn. In the game, king f8 was played, getting the king out, but then simply there's rook takes f7 with check, and the king goes out, but then there's just knight d3, rook b1 check is forced, king g2 up with the king, rook c3 attacking the knight goes back to e5. Now white is up 2 pawns, and this is just really close to a win. Rook b5 tickling the knight again. Well, rook c5 would have been a more accurate approach, but rook b5 is also going to be winning for black. Not winning, sorry, but for white. And here, Nodirbek played this brilliant move, rook g7. Well, the reason that it is brilliant because white is giving up his knight for 3 pawns. 3 linked pass pawns. Now, this of course needs a lot of calculation and a lot of courage, because 3 pawns versus a knight, it is still really tricky. And here in the game, Nodirbek finally decided to play rook g7, and it is the best move. He could also play something like rook a2 to get this rook out, because if you take on e5, well, rook takes g7, king f8, rook g6, you're going to win the other pawn and get this rook into into black's territory to check the king. But here, rook takes g7 immediately is the best approach. Rook takes e5, rook a2 getting the rook out. It is actually very similar where you play rook a2 first. King f8, rook g6, knight e4. Okay, now black is giving up the knight for the pawns. Here, rook e2 was played. And here, Nodirbek just says that I'm not going to take because I know that this is going to be a draw because your rooks are just way too active, and white is going to be struggling because if you take, you just lose the g4 pawn. But here, rook e2 was played, pinning the knight and the rook and now threatening to take it. And in the game, rook g5 was played. But here, white just simply takes on h6. There goes another pawn. Rook takes h6, knight c5, running away with the knight. Rook c6, pinning the knight and the rook once again. Knight a4, offering a trade of rooks. Rook a6, keep on tickling the knight. Knight c5 back, and we have a check. And we have another check. King f6, rook e8. Now, rook e8 is the blunder that is like throwing the win away. Rook a7 is fine. King f6. Here, white just simply needs to push this h6 pawn. Just push, and it's unstoppable. Rook g8, h7. Well, h7 is even not the best move. Here, you can go rook c7 here to pin the knight and the rook. And this is game over because this rook is going to be deflected away because of it needs to defend the h pawn. And now these two rooks can just work together to win the knight. And it is game over because white is just up 3 pawns. But instead, in the game, Nodirbek, even though he still has 19 minutes left on the clock, but this is a position that it is just way too complex. the only move here to win is to play h6. And in the game, Nodirbek decided to activate his other rook with rook e8, but now simply allowing black to defend the position, to hold the position together, and Gukesh found the best move, knight e6, h6. Now it's just too late, one move too late. And here, black has this only move to defend the position. All other moves like rook c2 check, just king g3, and the pawn is going to promote. But here, Gukesh found this brilliant defending move, rook e5. And I think this move certainly deserves a 2 exclamation mark. A brilliant move this is, because it is threatening to go knight f4, a discovered attack, and winning the rook. So this means that white is going to have to move the rook away, but by using that meantime, here rook a6 was played. I mean, white just needs to move the rook, either rook, and here decide to play rook a6 to pin the knight. But now this just simply allows black to get the rooks down with rook c2 check, king f1. If you go up with king g3, you might even get into trouble after rook e2. Now suddenly black gets to activate his rooks and even threatening mate here. And the only possible way here for white to get out of the mate is by taking on e6, takes and go g5, king f5, rook f8, king g6, rook g8, just keep on checking. But this might even just give black some winning chances. So instead of just allowing all of this to happen, Nodirbek now realizing that he has missed rook e5 completely, because it is a brilliant move, and he decided to play king f1, rook c1, king f2. Now, if you play like king g2, this is even losing now, because after rook e2, king, no matter where you go, let's say you go here, there's now rook h1 check, king g3, rook g1, rook g1, let's say you go there, and now king f7. This is just going to be winning for black. So in the game, Nodirbek realized that he had to play king f2, and Gukesh realized that, okay, this is just going to be a draw. My opponent is not falling for any mating ideas. I'm just going to keep checking. And then these two players finally agreed to a draw. 3-fold repetition. What a game this is. It is like, there are a lot of times where Nodirbek is winning, supposed to win, but in the end, Gukesh found this brilliant 96 rook e5 defending process, and I mean, he deserved this draw. And Nodirbek, he still had plenty of time, and I think he got a little bit hyped up, like a little bit excited, but if he had just slowed down, calmed down, and figured all of this out, and found that h6 winning move, then he would definitely win this game. But this game ended in a draw, not a big, like, it is not that unfortunate for Nodirbek, but clearly he had the winning chances. But just really lucky for Gukesh. Also, he deserved this draw. Alright, now let's go into this next game where it is round 7, and Gukesh is playing with the white pieces against Indian, also from India, a chess player from India, Pentala, Harikrishna. Now, like most of the people just simply call him Harry. Like Harry, he is now actually 3.5 out of 6, so not a bad result. And here Gukesh is with the white pieces. He played e4, and we have the French defense, a very normal opening. And I mean, this is our theory. G4. Now here Harry, he decided to play knight e7. But what he didn't know about this line of the French is that this is a really tricky line. Here black only have this black has this only move, and to go this, like, to get this knight, like, moving it anywhere else is not good, but black needs to play knight cd4. If you take on f5, there's knight f3, bishop takes f3. Well, actually, bishop takes f3 is not good, but f takes e6, f takes e6, knight d5. There's a lot of calculation. Bishop f3. Here, black goes d4. The king is kind of weak in the center. Like, both sides suddenly just reach a position like this. This is just really messy, and it's kind of hard for both players to calculate it to this point. And knight cd4, although it is the best move, but in the game, knight f e7 was played instead, the second best move, but this is just a lot worse. Bishop e3 was played, defending the d4 pawn, h5. Harry is starting an attack on the king side immediately, really aggressive. And Gukesh here, he defends with g4 by closing up the king side. Knight f5. Now, knight f5 looks pretty reasonable because white had just played g5 and created this huge weakness on f5. But now if you go knight f5, white will just simply play g6, which is something that black should not allow here. And now, in the game f6 was played, this is still completely fine, but allowing white to play g6 somehow created, in the future, is something not good for black. In the game, e takes f6 was played. Black's main problem is the king. His king is still in the center, and I think probably it will stay in the center in the rest of the game. G takes f6, because white's pawn on g6 is just way too scary. It is on the 6th rank already, 2 squares away from getting promoted. Also, white has all of the pieces developed, the king to safety. The rook can always come to the g file. Black is still kind of struggling with the development. Here, black decided, actually white's move, and Gukesh played bishop d3. Now, his idea is to threaten to take on f5 and then take on d5. But here, it turns out that this just simply allows knight c7. Black gets to get this knight back, attack the g6 pawn, also defend the f5 knight, a very flexible retreating move. Now, what white should have played here is actually to go knight a4 to attack the queen. Queen goes to a5, let's say, and now there's bishop d2, keep on attacking the queen. And probably bishop b4, and let's say bishop c3. This is a waiting move, and now waiting for black. Okay, are you going to take on c3, or are you just going to keep all of this like this? And probably rook g8 is also possible, attacking the g6 pawn, and now white can just go knight c5, for example. It is really, really messy, needs a ton of calculation, so it might not be easy to see all of this. And in the game, Gukesh decided to play bishop d3, knight c7. Black is now doing completely fine here. Rook g1, defending the pawn, bishop g7, blockading the pawn, but the bishop is not placed on a good square because it is being blocked by its own pawn. So the bishop only has defending uses, kind of passive. Knight a4 was played, queen d6. Now this is a not so good move. In queen b4 would have been the better option. Knight c5, and here black's best move is actually to take on c5, because if you take on c5, there's now e5. Black is sacrificing half a piece, but the compensation is enough because black gets this big, huge black center and threatening to push e4, d4, which is kind of unstoppable. And black's king is actually really safe here. White doesn't have a clear way to break into the position because there are no pawns in the center for white. But this is, again, really complicated. And in the game, queen d6 was played, which is a move that looks more normal. b4 was played, but simply now Gukesh can just safely put this knight on c5, because if you go takes and takes here, white is attacking the queen, so there's no time for black to push e5. And knight c5 would have been the best move here, but instead b4 was played, and now b6, preventing knight c5, b5, a takes b5, bishop takes b5, bishop takes b5, rook takes b5. So both sides traded off a pair of light square bishops. And here black's problem is that black has this huge weakness on b6. But he defended well and played knight e3, f takes e3. And now we have this 2 knights versus knight and bishop. Now at first sight, it looks like white is doing much, much better. But it turns out white is not that good. Black is still fine after this rook c6 move, which was found in the game by Harry, and defending the b6 pawn. The king, even though it's not castled, but it will be castled because now it is really safe. The bishop guards everything, prevents this pawn from being pushed, and the king can get to safety on the next move. Queen b3, and here we have short castle. And the position is close to equalization now. But here, actually, besides short castle, knight f5 is a slightly better approach because attacking the e3 pawn, if you take on b6, takes, let's say, black is going to use this b6 pawn to exchange for the e3 pawn. So, and even if you cannot take here, but you can go bishop h6 as well to threaten to take on e3 on the next move. It is going to be an easier draw that way with knight f5, but instead short castle was played. The king is getting to safety now, but black is down a pawn. Knight takes b6. White does have some chances here because white has this outside pass pawn, but if black plays well, black is going to be fine. But the main problem is that black is not playing well here, and black played bishop h6. This is a mistake, simply because it's not that necessary here. White can just defend the e3 pawn with rook e1. Now the best move is actually to go knight f5, still activate this knight, use the knight to attack the e3 pawn, and now rook e1. Bishop h6 is not a good move because there's knight d5, but here black can just simply play rook b8 to just pin the knight, attack the knight, trade off a few pieces, and it's gonna be a draw. But here bishop h6 first, and then, Gukesh, he didn't play rook e1 and played knight a4, which is a not so good move. But in the game here, black now finally played knight f5, rook c5, and here the position is once again equal. But here, he played a mistake. He played rook takes c5, simply allowing white to take on c5 with the knight. The knight is now really strong, attacking the e6 pawn and controls a lot of important squares. Now, if black doesn't take, then what should black do? Black can actually just go rook f8 to defend the rook, and if you take on c6, there's queen takes c6, even though the knight gets to c5 now, but there's bishop takes e3, fortunately. The main problem here is that takes. Now, if you take on e3, which did happen in the game, if you take with the bishop here, which is a slightly better option, then there's queen b7 now. The queen slides into the position, threatens queen h7 mate, and let's say it blocks, but then you just lose the e6 pawn. Taking on e6 is not even the best approach here, but you play rook e1 first, knight f5, and then you take on e6. Now, without the queens on the board, that endgame will be much harder for black to defend. And here, however, Harry, instead of taking with the bishop, he took with the knight. And this is just simply a blunder. He blundered this next move, queen b7. And queen h7 is unstoppable. Only bishop g7 is possible because before, if you take with the bishop, the knight is on f5 and you can play queen e7 or knight e7. But then at this point, the knight is on e3 and stuff on f5. The queen cannot go back and you have to play bishop g7 to prevent queen h7. But now there's simply rook e1, knight f5, knight takes e6. This is all over. White is getting all the pieces all in. And I guess that is just a big blunder by Harry because he just simply didn't see queen b7 coming. Just simply like a really simple blunder. It happens a lot. Queen f7, king h8, knight g7, and Gukesh won this game cleanly, taking off the pawns. And after f5 here, a few checks, but the king immediately got to safety. Rook h4, king f4, queen b8, rook e5, queen d6. There are already no checks, and after king g5 here, black resigned the game because the king is just in a very safety spot, defending the g6 pawn. Even king h6 is possible, and it is all over. White is up 2 pawns. The pieces are all cramped together. They cannot move. The knight cannot move because there's queen h7 mate. The rook cannot move because it needs to defend the knight. Also, rook e7 is coming on the next move. This is all over, and here black resigned. Gukesh won the 7th game. He is now 5 out of 7 in the tie for first place with Nodirbek Abdusattorov, and Pragnananda. But there are still a couple of rounds going on. We are already now on the second half of this tournament, but still there are a couple of games and anything can happen. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed these 2 games as well as this video, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!